So I'll get started, guys. I think anybody interested in AI has had a ton of good info and coverage today. Practical cases like Antonio Alegria, I guess, make it more real. And this session now is a different one where I think we have the opportunity to learn from different angles, very, very different angles and points of view on the potential impact of technology such as AI into society, into industry, into everything that affects us around us. So we really have the luck to have here Amílcar, Sofia, Ricardo, and Pedro. Those will be the four panelists. I'll be rotating here with some questions. Actually, Sofia will have a bit of a tight window to join us because of that event that Carlos mentioned. So she'll join us in about 15 minutes. But we basically have this incredible set of panelists for this reason. Carlos organized this in a way we can hear people from the angles of what's the impact in, for example, areas of jobs and universal income eventually, and other topics that we'll discuss with Amílcar. We have Sofia, who we can query on areas about related to ethics and specifically accountabilities, responsibilities. Where do we divide the line between humans and machine, in this case in software? And a completely different angle coming to Ricardo from a humanist point of view of how to look at these from a person, human in the picture. And finally with Pedro, Diniz, in terms of examples of learning and applying this for business in different services. Okay, so let me go around to Amílcar. Amílcar, thank you for joining us. I know you research a lot of advanced things for how is the future of our economy looking like, with people in the future having to work less, supposedly because technology is doing more. And so I hear many times as seeing the journalists just focus on robots, and I keep saying, forget the robots. The problem is the software bits. That's the challenge. What do you see as the biggest challenges that are coming with AI in terms of foreseen impact in jobs and employment and the work you're researching on?
Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation and thank you for the questions, Miguel. Well, I am a skeptic on this. As you mentioned, there's a lot of debate going on in OECD, World Economic Forum, about the impact of automation, i.e. AI and robotization on jobs, and whether this will mean that we're going to get less jobs. I am skeptical on this for various reasons. One, if we look more broadly at historical developments, the Industrial Revolution, the introduction of electricity, of telecommunications, the introduction of internet, you didn't see a massive loss of jobs. What you saw was a restructuring of the economy. Of course, we're going to have short-term impact in the sense that some sectors will destroy jobs, but others will create jobs. The second reason why I'm skeptical about the idea that we're going to lose a lot of jobs is that actually for a lot of developed economies and countries, what we're facing in the next 50 years is actually a period of not population growth, but population stabilization, or for countries like Portugal, of population decrease. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So actually the challenge for us, I've said this in various outlets, what I'm afraid of is that it's not that that robots or AI will steal jobs, is that they don't arrive soon enough so that we can compensate the loss of people we're going to have in the labor market and to keep current levels of production. That for me is a much more deeper problem.
So you're underestimating the ability of AI to reproduce itself compared to the rate of humans to reproduce themselves.
Possibly. The question is, there are going to be obvious short-term events. Let me just add a third reason why I'm a skeptic. If you look at recent years with the growth of IT and how it's permeating various sectors of economic activity, one would expect that in the past 20 years, we would have seen a massive increase of productivity across the world. Massive. Everybody started working with computers. Everybody's doing stacks of things on the internet. We are now moving to classes being done on the internet. But then if you look at the average rate of growth of productivity in the past 15 years, and of course, part of that was the big recession, but productivity is not increasing. One of the biggest problems we're actually facing right now economically is that productivity does not increase. If productivity does not increase, salaries won't increase. And we're entering this kind of negative cycle that we were supposed to be getting out of in the last 2-3 years until this crisis happened. So I would be very skeptical about the idea that actually AI will destroy jobs. But still, we could consider how that can happen. There's a recent OECD studies that suggest that the impact of, and they haven't distinguished between robotization and AI. Okay, so that's one of the problems that we have with the current evidence on this, is that they tend to take the two things in common, so robotization and AI together. What this OECD study would suggest is that, one, there's big variations in how automation will impact on jobs. Okay, so certain countries, by the nature of the sectors and the type of economies they run, will be more affected than others. What do I mean by that? We'll have countries that are already very, very focused on high-skilled sectors will be less affected by the jobs impact of automation, AI, robotization. Countries that rely more on middle-skilled qualifications, like Germany, Portugal, Greece, Spain, will possibly be at a higher risk of being affected by the substitution of jobs by automated sources of production. There's also variations in the level of risk. Okay, so what this OECD study would suggest is that the risk varies between countries, but the level of risk also varies between countries. So for instance, countries that would be less in lower levels of risk, even the type of risk would be lower than what other countries would face. What do I mean by this? For instance, for countries like Greece and Germany, the study would suggest that the impact of automation would be twofold. Given half of it would be a significant rise in the risk of automation, and half of that effect would be a very high risk. Okay, so a very substantive part of the working population would be subjected to this high risk of substitution. By jobs, the risk would be lower, and it will be a less intensive risk. Okay, so there's huge diversity in how AI would impact jobs.
What about, apologies, but then in that line of thought, if we are talking about risk, which is funny, remember we started with technology as potentially being a good thing, and now here we are talking about black swan almost types of moments. So what about then the human side of the equation here from a society big picture point of view? So you research things about policies, government policies, potentially income, whether universal income or not, some kind of job guarantees. So let's assume that countries are affected differently. What do you see that is starting to be considered as options for the impacts of this in society and economy at large?
You know, it's quite curious. I started my PhD 20 years ago, and my PhD over time, part of it was actually about the topic of creating a basic income, whether we should or not. And there are two things that, so this debate about basic income is already more than 20, 30 years. Okay? All of the options that we're discussing now, which are, one, either we create a basic income, i.e. everybody gets a given monthly fee or annual fee by the government, to which they can add income from work, or if they decide not to work, they don't work. Okay. The second option would be a work guarantee, i.e. the government secures that the possibility that everybody can have a job. Okay, that means creating jobs in not-for-profit activities. We're talking about some things like care. This could be actually a solution for Portugal, in the sense that we have massive problems in care. If anything, COVID-19 has shown that the reason why a lot of people have died in care homes is because they're not adequately staffed. So we have nurses going around from hospitals to nursing homes and nursing homes to hospitals, transmitting the virus. And nobody thought, oh, actually, we have a human resources problem here. Okay, so an idea would be to create a work guarantee. A third idea that has been discussed in parallel with these two is work sharing. Okay, i.e., we reduce the number of hours that people are required to work to get a full salary. That opens up the possibility that we can expand the number of jobs. Okay, all these ideas have been in discussion since even the 1980s. Okay, so that I almost just after I was born. In France, there's been a huge debate about this coming from the 1980s as a response to the great inflation episodes of the 1970s and to the crisis that followed in the 1980s. The basic income idea has gained a lot of attention recently in previous years, which has been a surprise for me. In part, this is driven by there's a lot of people in the tech industry in the US that has been very, very keen on the idea, very supportive of the idea. And crucially, some center-right center-right parties are starting to think of a basic income as a solution for an alternative model of social protection. And that's why, for instance, you saw a center-right government in Finland trying out a basic income scheme. It wasn't a true basic income scheme, but and it was more about benefit simplification. But still, it was a basic income scheme, and it was run by a center-right government, which admittedly it cut it off in the middle before the trial was done. It was able to be completed.
Well, they had apparently good reasons for it, right? It seems it's hard to contain experiments in economies separate from the rest of the planet around them, right?
Yeah, I have to say, I know people. Strangely enough, the guy that was overseeing the pilot was one of the guys in my PhD viva. So was one of my examiners in the PhD
that's
viva.
outstanding.
Yeah. No, this has been. He was in Lisbon 2 years ago. And we were reminiscing about that the same questions that we discussed in my viva about the basic income, the community, whilst it's grown in importance and relevance politically and policy-wise, it's still not able to deal with the key questions that the basic income deals with, which is at the heart of the basic income is the idea that it's about real freedom, i.e. the ability that you can do whatever you want. And part of that real freedom is the freedom not to work. Okay. Now this raises a policy problem, i.e., which has been crossing the debates in this community about basic income, which is at what level do you determine the basic income? How much should someone get per month? Because if you raise it to a level that allows a person to decide not to work, then it becomes really expensive and physically unsustainable, right?
I hear there are some countries already doing that in the Middle East or
Amílcar,
something like. But
how about training people in this transition instead of giving only a basic income?
Yeah. I'm not a fan of basic income. I think there's a lot of gaps because of exactly of that. If it's to do what it's supposed to do, is too expensive. That's one of the areas where I find it more difficult to give you an answer because it's really difficult to implement. It's very difficult to train people, retrain people. If there's something that we have failed throughout most of the past 20, 30 years, is to put in place, and I'm not talking about Portugal only, but in most cases, the effectiveness of retraining programs is very low.
Hmm.
Okay? The market tends to adjust, not by retraining people, but by sending people out of the labor market and bringing new people in, rather than retraining. And that for me is actually going to be a big challenge, how we retrain people. In my view, we should really invest for that. We should, more than that, we should be training our kids to program from first basic after fourth. Like I haven't been able to do that, but I'm starting to teach my kid to do some programming with some online databases, because I think that's going to be the key task.
Eventually, in OutSystems.
If you see this as a long-term,
So wait, but for a second, but then Antonio is telling you that he's making it easier for software to program itself.
Even
now you're going to
programming
get your kid out of a job. No, I'm kidding.
even programming itself will
But
be.
to your point, it seems, Amílcar, then that it would actually be a good idea to apply AI to the big problem you mentioned of retraining people. It seems like humans are difficult firmware to be updated. So that would be indeed a complement. And it seems that type of idea Antonio Alegria presented with some tools helping humans to not necessarily learn faster, but be able to do in their job things more easily. It seems that augmenting the humans is a good way to go to your training.
Yeah, absolutely. That has been actually one of my concerns. So my work in recent years has been mostly focused on the impact of demographic aging in the welfare state and in the labor market. What I see as, for me, what has to be the part of the response to the impact of demographic aging is actually automation. It's AI, it's robotization. It's something we haven't discussed much, but bioengineering. No, not bioengineering. When, for instance, let me give you an example. One of the biggest problems we have in providing care to seniors is the fact there's a lot of turnover, okay? It's a really hard job, physically hard, done mostly by women, okay? And part of it is, for instance, having to clean and move seniors around with a lot of mobility limitations, right?
Yeah.
So the solution will have to, for us to deal with this, which is a massive problem. Like you cannot imagine how much turnover there is in this sector, and the difficulty in hiring people for this sector. But the solution will have to be some kind of exoskeleton that will help people. That will help people in their mobility in assisting seniors, rather than robots doing services for seniors. Because if what I've been told about robots is that robots can't feel. So if a robot doesn't have a sense of feeling, it can basically kill someone whilst providing care or break their arm, right? So what you need is, so for me, I'm much more positive about the role of AI. I'm positive that AI can, for instance, provide us with a lot of efficiency gains in the public sector. A lot of the problems that we have now currently, for instance, we're having an issue with how are we not able to pay the furlough scheme to employers who need it right now? How are we taking so much time in paying in computing the value of pensions, because it takes almost 10 months for people to get their pension approved? A lot of this would have been avoided if the strategy over the past 10, 15 years would have been to really strengthen IT systems, and that involves also AI in social security. And we haven't done that. So what happened was we lost a lot of people who were working in the machine, and they weren't replaced by new technology nor by new workers. So now we don't have enough people, and we don't have the IT systems in place to deal with this type of processes. So IT and AI would have been a hugely powerful tool for us to introduce massive gains in public administration. And what we can gain from that in terms of lower taxes and increased economic activity, that could be huge. So I don't see AI as a menace to public administration, to jobs. I actually see this as helping us to deal with the massive challenges that we have ahead of us.
Totally. So it's amazing. A lot of the things are in here. Carlos, you're trying to.
Yeah, I think Sofia is ready to participate in the panel, but I think that Amílcar now is the host. So
no, I'm okay if someone comes in.
No, the host of the meeting. You should release the video.
Okay, I'll leave.
No, but Carlos, I think Sofia is right now as attendee, so you need to.
Yeah, I'm going to promote Sofia to host.
Okay.
But I need to be the host to do that. I think some kind of Okay.
Okay.
I'm the host.
You're back the host, Carlos.
No, the host.
So I'll introduce Sofia. As I said before, Sofia is a professor also in IT from Queen Mary University in London, works in the Portuguese Army and cybersecurity and cyber defense. And so we are, when Carlos, you give me a signal, we are counting on her joining us.
Sofia
hopefully
is on the meeting now.
Sofia, can you talk already?
Yes, I'm here.
Outstanding.
Okay.
Outstanding.
You have stopped my video, so I think I cannot be seen.
You know, Carlos is trying to steal the show. He just wants to see us.
Over complete control.
He's worried about the accountability of AI in this call. Well, let's take advantage of your time anyway, Sofia. We know you are in the middle of an event, and therefore this was a double duty, being present in two places at the same time. That's the beauty of virtual meetings. But thank you for joining us. And we just went over with Amílcar in a bunch of topics related to societal impacts and basic income and other things. And in your area of expertise, we'd be very interested in studies you have done regarding, well, especially in topics of law and accountability, intellectual property, and some other things. So we would like to start by asking you, what is the bleeding edge in terms of understanding of challenges of AI accountability? So we all understand that with the examples given by Carlos, there will be more and more uses of AI, say, as complementary to diagnostics in medical exams or other areas. And of course, the question has to be raised about the accountability of the results that come out of that. So what can you tell us about what's being discussed in that direction?
Hi, Miguel. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me here and for the introduction. And this is a very fascinating topic, and I praise the initiative, and I congratulate you all, and in particular Carlos Cruz for this organization. And I would like to compliment everyone. I have a very limited time, as you have said, so I will go straight to your question. And I must say that there are so many legal challenges on artificial intelligence, but in fact, I would say one of the most important one is exactly the attribution, or as you have put it, the accountability for the actions or omissions of the automated machines when we are in the context of artificial intelligence. And that happens because of a particular characteristic that we have in those automated machines, and that is autonomy. That is something that we don't have in other machines. When we are in the context of artificial intelligence, we have autonomy. So the machine learning, the logic rules, knowledge representation, etc., that makes it possible to have this autonomy where you have a machine that is able to perform tasks and learn from their activity or whatever, but we have an action or an omission that is from the automated machine itself. So that is what is really different in terms of a legal perspective, comparing with the analog world and what we have before the artificial intelligence. So whenever there is an action or an omission from this kind of automated machine with artificial intelligence, the question that we have is who should bear the legal consequences of these actions or omissions. And we have two different dimensions. Usually we only refer to the dimension of liability. For example, who should be responsible for the damages of a car accident involving autonomous vehicles. But we have a very important dimension which should also be addressed. There is the dimension of ownership. For example, if we have, in terms of creative activities, we should bear in mind that now, at the current moment, we already have paintings, but also music or sculptures that are created by machines itself. But we also have, for example, machines working in factories, so we have the results of several types of works created by the machine. So who should have the ownership of these results of things that are created by these machines? And there are multiple possibilities. So should it be the supplier of the hardware? Should it be the programmer of the software? Should it be the owner of the machine or the person who benefits from the machine? The supplier of the data. And when we talk about the data, which data? Because we have so many types of data. Should we discuss about the data on which the decision was based, or the data on which the learning process took place, for example? And when we are talking about the programmer of the software, we are talking about very complex software. So probably we will not have just one programmer. We will have multiple inputs from several persons, and then the machine will work on those initial algorithms or inputs that were given before. So there is a detachment from the origin, from the programmers, and from the results of the machine. So that raises very difficult questions when we ask who should be responsible, who should bear the legal consequences for the actions or omissions from the machine. In the dimension of liability on one hand, but also on the dimension of ownership on the other hand. So there are many solutions that have been rehearsed. By way of analogy, we have, for example, the regime of the product liability, when we say, well, the producer will be responsible for whatever the failure that the product may have, or, for example, the animal regime or the agent regime. There are multiple solutions that have been rehearsed, but there is a primary difficulty in all these regimes, because we have to know who controls the animal, or who controls the product, or who controls the commands given to an agent. So, so we come back to those old questions. Should it be, who really is the producer, and which is the product? Should it be the software, the hardware, and what part of the software, or the data, and what part of the data? So that is the difficulty of finding a one-size solution for this problem.
So let me ask you something there. So, I apologize to interrupt, but the feeling I'm getting now is that one of hiring that strategy consultant, I asked him for the time, and he asked me for my watch because I asked you 4 questions and you'll ask 25 more questions. So, so let me get help for our panel and for our attendees here. Do we have some answers?
Yeah. Unfortunately, I have more questions than answers.
Yes, we do.
Yeah, I have more questions. But there is an interesting solution that I would want to refer. I would like to refer here. In the European Parliament in 2017, there was a recommendation from the European Parliament to the European Commission in order to establish an electronic person status for automated machines. So whenever there was an action or an omission, we would say that it would be attributable to the machine itself. But I don't think that is a good solution for now. For now, that is a very strange solution. It raises so many other questions. So does it have assets in order to be liable, for example? Or if it is owner of a painting, for example, will it receive the income for exploring that painting, for example? So it raises more questions than it answers.
Yeah. You keep asking me for my watch, so we give the time. No, understood. I have a tremendous curiosity, Sofia, in one topic that Amílcar approached briefly, and that is a few of us, for example, are engineers from background, electronic engineers, both dealt in learning with hardware and software. And the fundamental thing I could never understand from a legal point of view is the potential for a line to divide software from hardware in the sense of what you're describing. Meaning, when you mention machines and when you mention software, for example, the things with the programmer and so on, you read a lot about robots do this, robots do that. A lot of people watch the movie from Walt Disney, the Wall-E and the robot. And so on. But a reality is more and more, I mean, we talk to Siri, right? On the iPhone or use Google Assistant or something. There's no robot. There's just AI that is running.
Yeah. Old-fashioned.
So are there ways, for example, the electronic person you were describing from the European Union, are there ways to separate the real use of what is a machine, where does the machine stop and where just pure software. Controlling? Because a machine is nothing more than a bunch of pieces of metal or plastic or electronics controlled by software. That's it. So where's the line? How do you define an electronic person? Are there ways to divide the line between software and hardware or machines? Is that possible today?
Yeah, in legal terms, we have to establish that division between the hardware, that should be just the physical parts, and then the software, that would be the logical part, the instructions that you give to that physical components that will make that machine work and do something to do some task. But in fact, it is harder and harder as the technology advances to, in practical terms, to be very clear in that division. But I believe that it is still possible today to say that, well, the failure was from the hardware because it should have a lag in that machine, and it didn't have a lag, so it has a lag, but it wasn't structured enough in order to support all the weight that it has, for example. Or you can say, no, the hardware was okay, but the software, the instructions that were given in order to that kind of, I don't know, piece of machine to work wasn't properly done. So in legal terms, you have to, it's quite a difficult exercise, but I believe you still have to do it. Today you will have to do it. And in order to find someone that is liable or has the ownership of something, you will have to have that difficult task done.
Okay. So last question for you. I know your time is limited and we'll have to move on to the other panelists, but here's the biggest challenge I see going forward in legal terms then, which is, okay, you gave good examples where maybe an autonomous machine can be imputable for some actions or omissions, maybe a piece of software programmed by a programmer but could be imputable. What about software that is taking actions and decisions that has not been written by anybody because it's just based on data? So if you have that augmented cancer image recognition saying, well, we assess that this image of this person has cancer in their lungs, and that's the advice we give the doctor based on 125,000 images that I recognized as a data algorithm. There was no programmer involved. Nobody wrote that piece of advice ever. It was just pure data analysis and manipulation, like it was from recognizing cats in an internet image. So where are we going to define there the imputability for these cases?
So that is artificial intelligence, right? So you just pick the beginnings and then the machine will do the rest, right? That's what you are saying, correct?
There's nobody writing it.
Yeah. No, at the beginning you could have something. You have to have something at the beginning.
You define the architecture, but then the data.
Yeah, just a data set.
Architecture is, you should define the objectives of that software, and then it will do the rest, right? So at the beginning you will have something, and there are some papers that are being drafted at this moment. There are some from the European Union on that regard. And what they are now discussing is that you should have some regime that creates some liability rules for accountability for artificial intelligence engineers. So those who are responsible for putting in action those kind of automated machines. So at the beginning, when you create the machine, you should create a machine in order to avoid any accidents, in order to avoid bias in the decisions. And that is a very difficult rule, legal framework that will have to be created. Since there is yet other problem of transparency, there is a moment where you don't know how the machine decides, not even the programmers. They don't know how the machine gets there. There are so many inputs, and it gets so complex that at the end, you really don't know what are the criteria for deciding. And that's one of the problems that we have here. So that is also something that the European Union says that it will have to be done to create a system that makes it easier to trace and control the machines. So classify all the machines to know which machines exist, who created the machines, in order to establish some links between the creation and the creators and the machines that are based on artificial intelligence and which are going to act in our society. And then they try also to establish the need to develop ethical principles, code of conduct that we should all obey.
Very good. It's going to be a challenging world. It seems like we continue having more questions than answers.
Totally correct. I'm sorry to disappoint you, but
No.
I'm kidding.
More questions than answers.
Now I finally get it, Carlos, why we need AI is to answer all these questions.
To analyze this video in real time and answer.
Very much so. All right, Sofia. So I'm not sure if your time is tied. I'll move on a bit to the other panelists as well. So
thank you very much for having me.
Thank you for joining us here. Ricardo, would this be a good time to join you as well, or
let me
Carlos?
Hello.
make you,
Yes. Okay.
Are you listening?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
You're coming loud
Hi,
and
guys.
clear. Ricardo, so very good. Thanks for joining us. We wanted now to shift gears completely away from questions of legalities, questions on society impacts and economy, and we want to look at what happens to the human soul. Is mankind described to be like in the movie Wall-E, to just float in a floating mattress and let the robots do all the work and the software make all the magic, and we can all just go slurp sodas and do nothing with basic income? And what will happen to the human soul? I mean, what is your perspective on this whole story?
Okay, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank Carlos for this invitation. I'm still thinking about why he even had this idea, because I'm an outsider. I feel like being outside looking in. I'm not a specialist. I know nothing technically about.
Great.
AI.
That's what we want. That's why we want you here.
Thank you.
How can we look at the ethical issues? How can we look
Okay,
at
so
the
now
people aspect?
I must warn you that this is just an experiment. I'm not constrained to what I'm going to say. This is like Kierkegaard's works. You have an author that doesn't account for his words. This is just an experiment, okay?
So don't play back your words in the recording ever again. This will be self-destroyed. That's okay.
Yes, that's it. That's the idea.
Okay. That's okay.
So first, I was thinking about just read some things. Then I thought about talking, but I think we don't have enough time. So I really am going to read. Okay.
okay.
First question. How should we philosophically define the ethical status of any AI design device? Discussions about ethics and ethical status have always been controversial. In fact, if we go back some centuries ago, we can watch people discussing if Indians were humans or had any soul. A couple of years ago, white people discussed whether blacks should or should not be enslaved. And only some decades ago, they were granted citizenship. On the other hand, determinists and libertists still discuss about the nature of human action, and no one can assure something like free will. We still have no clue about what consciousness really is and works. Even so, I believe we are not discussing the sex of angels when we think about the ethical status of AI design devices, because, quoting a character from Breaking Bad, shit happens. So when we think about the social impact of AI, we must consider the question about responsibility. In The Path of Jeremy Bentham, Peter Singer suggested that an ethical community implies the concept of sentience, that is, the ability of any entity to have subjective perceptual experience, something AI devices cannot experience, but only simulate. They cannot feel or have real emotions. They have neither pleasure nor pain. So, whenever address ethical questions on AI concerning responsibility, my opinion is that humans are the only agents responsible for whatever happens in this fascinating field. This is the first question. Feel free to make other questions.
No, I mean, basically, what do you believe then to be the main ethical issues? So you believe then there is even not a question of ethical issues because
well, there is responsibility. That is the main question. But that means we must have an ethical status. Who defines that? Humans must define it. I'm in the point of view of an humanist, like Carl said. Yeah. That is the experiment here. What is the point of view of a humanist? Human being is the center of the thing. So we must be the ones to set the main issue. The main issue is responsibility, and machine cannot be accounted for it.
So your point is human values must be on this decision.
Absolutely.
Not only the
no
logic,
discussion about that.
The logic and the economics of that to
yes,
make them more performant, but you need to take in account several human values, even at the A level. Otherwise, do not kill someone or something. At least this basic human assumptions must be built in from scratch from day one in any AI that you should implement.
Yes.
And if you think that the society, you are build things in the society that are AI based, this will be very important for the society as well, right?
I don't question the importance of AI. It's just not a question. We are facing a new phenomenon. We are facing a new time, and we cannot just deal it. It's impossible. We are facing. The question is: are we talking just about a tool or an agent? I believe there are factors on AI that can be considered not anymore as a simple tool, and that brings us to the next question about the other main ethical concern. I believe it's about transparency, but above all about predictability. In the chart Carlos showed in the beginning, concerns are almostly about transparency and other stuff. There is no topic about predictability, and for me this is the core problem. We cannot downplay the question about transparency and predictability of algorithms. As Nick Bostrom stressed some years ago, because there are the two issues, these are the two issues that are potentially less controllable by humans in the future. We must have control. That is the same humanist point of view. And I stress again, I'm only thinking about this point of view, not, this is not my opinion, okay? Transparency is not the only desirable feature on AI. It is also important that AI algorithms taking over social functions be predictable to those they govern.
Ricardo, today we have this kind of deterministic algorithms, meaning for this input you will have this output. This is predictability. When you put AI in the equation and you have some kind of a design of a system, sometimes even AI experts cannot predict what will be the outcome of that system in specific circumstances, because there are millions of hypotheses, let's say, in variables, and they train with a subset, but it's impossible to use all the data in the world to train an algorithm. So that must be some kind of unexpected situation. And this predictability, in some cases, it will be difficult to have 100%.
I agree with you, but then you leave the humanist point of view. You start to think on a technological ground.
Yeah.
That is the problem here. I'm not saying we must do one thing or another. I'm just
to take in account.
Yeah, that's it. That's it. It's an experiment. What does humanists sees on AI?
Well, the fact is, it's coming to us, and we are all here. 7 billion, maybe these 7 billion humans in the planet are just little data points in a big AI algorithm that is the human planet.
That's right. So the problem is we were on a theocentric world till the Renaissance. Then we got an anthropological center. Mm-hmm. And now we will have a digital center, I believe.
Or maybe a planet center, and we have to look
yeah,
at
that's it.
We
that's
are just cells of a bigger being, right?
Is it the AI, the new God that control everything?
We can do some bets.
Yeah, so Carlos, should I shift gears here for?
Yeah, we are running out of time. Just
Ricardo, thank you.
Thank you very much.
We'll move on here for the final minutes, and thanking everybody with Pedro Diniz joining us from a more down-to-earth pragmatic approach. Pedro, you've been working in many years of industries, software, hardware, telecom, and you need to see this nice fluffy stuff put into practice. You're actually a learner yourself. You've been studying Cloudera and Andrewing, and here's our invitation to you is, what types of ideas are you getting where to put this into practice on a daily basis of work we do in the office, in selling products and services? Where do you get inspiration for seeing this put into practice in real life of a business user like yourself?
Okay, thank you for your invitation, Carlos, and also Miguel.
Welcome.
For the question. Okay, it was a very nice experience to try to re-educate myself on the AI subjects, and I found that these massive online courses are very helpful because you have access to top mind about this subject like Anjan or others. So it's very easy if you want to enter this boat to find technical knowledge and business knowledge. Personally, I think that, and probably this is not a very passionate subject as the others that we have been listening, that companies and company owners and CEOs, they see every day in LinkedIn, on the news, that they need to be a digital company, and these crises help them to realize they really need to be a digital company, or using Antonio's words, they need to be a software company. But now we are telling them that they need to be an AI company or a data company. So they don't have at this time opportunity for big investments, but they know that the data they have will help them to reduce churn or to improve sales or to prioritize leads or to recruit people. So they need the data they have. The data they have are very important because the success of AI project is both from a technical feasibility and also from a business insight. You don't need to be a genius to understand that ice cream sells when the temperature goes up, but probably there are some hidden insights in the companies that only the business experts can help you. So I think this is an opportunity to address these owners and CTOs and CEOs of companies and proposing them to do pilots to explore their data and feeding them with technical expertise with the deep learning, for instance. And probably you won't get a data lake. Probably what you'll have is an Excel file that you need to then to correct all the data. But when we approach companies and we show them that the data are important, mainly for their activity, they can work with the companies like any integrator or even a consultancy company, then they can have quick results, like probably not the most valuable projects, but projects that are feasible. And mentioning Carlos about the AI cycle, they need to feel confident on the success of small projects, quick win projects, to engage with all the decision makers in the company. Of course, these, as Ricardo was saying, it's now a new paradigm. Even the data that were being used to train the algorithms, it's not valid anymore. People are not doing transactions outside their homes. People are buying more online, not in physical stores. But AI by itself needs to readapt and reinforce robustness.
It's
So
even a challenge for AI itself, this COVID situation, right? It was not predictable based on history.
yeah, the robustness of AI is being challenged. But I think there is opportunity to, especially for medium companies, they don't have the resources. Probably they don't have people to recruit as AI engineer or AI experts, because the tools are there. Everything is triple done with every cloud service provider, and we can help them to crunch their data and find some insights and to help them to succeed on their business goals.
So no particular ideas so far that have popped to your mind how you're going to make the next million and move on from your job based on AI applied to your business?
Well, not really. But I think that one of the things the customers would like to know is how to, are always the main drivers, how to reduce costs, how to increase sales, and customer satisfaction. So I think those are the three main topics that we should address with final customer to do some prototyping.
Have you seen ways of starting to experiment or getting more ideas out of the courses you're attending with Coursera on this that could be inspiring to other people? How do you get the best ideas coming out of those moments of learning this stuff?
Well, I think that these courses are also very valuable to define priorities. Of course, we always like to know about cognitive success, like to autopilot cars or vision recognition, speech recognition, or even a complicated game. As a fact, people say that the best gamers will be AI software, not humans, in e-gaming. But I think that we need to focus more in customer data, probably with some simple algorithms like linear regression or logistic regression will be, between brackets, enough to show the success of these AI solutions. And the good news is that if you are here on this community and you are seeking to shift or to upgrade your career with AI, everything is available. The tools, the learning courses, and the community that we are now starting. And of course, this will help everybody to go in a AI maturity level curve very easily.
Very good. Carlos, back to you for a time check because you have some last question and we have a minute to go.
Okay, thank you, Miguel.
Thank you a lot, Pedro.
Thank you, Miguel, for leading the panel. I think we are on time for ending the session. Thank you all the participants and speakers for take your time in this Saturday morning to be part of this. We intend to have more events in the future, more specific areas of AI. We are going to share also the video of this during the next week, and after the event we are going to receive kind of a pool questions from Eventbrite, and if you want to enroll in some of the deeplearning.ai courses, you have kind of a discount. I think it's 50% discount, and you could even apply for a scholarship without paying nothing to enroll these courses. And thank you very much for being with us. I think it's a very interesting community, and we'll try to promote more of these events in the future. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Okay, thank you everybody. Have a rest of a great Saturday. Take care.
You too. Take care.
Okay.